Well, hello, welcome to How to Change a Negative Behavior Pattern. I'm really excited to have you. This process that I use with clients, I guess one thing that I should start by saying, because I know some of you on this call haven't worked with me in the past, as a coach, I tend to work with people on two levels. And at what I would call the surface level are practical tools that people can use to be more effective in their job or transitioning careers. Could be a time management tool, could be a tool to help you talk to somebody and have a more effective conversation, especially a conversation that you might be avoiding. Could be something you can use to make it easier to stay focused and prioritize. So there are a lot of practical tools that I use to help people be more effective in the short term. But what I also do with people who are working with me and who are interested is what I call deeper growth work. And that's what this class is going to be about. That deeper growth work is about the kinds of things that trip you up. So it feels sometimes that we have habits of maybe procrastination, or of being a people pleaser and putting other people's needs before us, or not speaking up for ourselves, or as one person shared in this morning's classes, picking fights. But we tend to do things that seem to get in our way, and so we can make improvements in our lives, but sometimes we can only make minimal improvements, and it doesn't seem like we can make improvements that last for a long period of time. And so one of the things that I've sort of dedicated my coaching career to is looking at places where people get stuck and that they don't grow. So when we have tools and that helps people and they grow and they become more effective and get to their next level of success, that's great. But when we have people who continue to struggle, and despite getting insights and having aha moments and having great tools that they can use to manage their time and their lives and their relationships more effectively, they're still getting stressed out, they're still struggling, they're still falling back into the same behavior patterns, then we want to look deeper. And so I've always done this in coaching with my clients, but just over the past few years, I've realized that we can develop tools and processes to make this more tangible. So what I'm going to share with you today are the tools that I use with my clients to walk them through the process of completely getting to the bottom of anything that keeps them stuck, and to change any negative behavior patterns that are getting in the way of them living life at the level they want to live life. So I'm going to start with this model called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm sure that most of you have seen this model before. Some of you may have not. So just to give you a very quick overview, because this is not what we're going to spend most of our time on today, but this is what I spend a lot of time on in many of my classes. And that is that Maslow was a psychologist in the 1960s, and he developed this model to show how people are motivated. And he basically has this pyramid with 5 levels in it, and he said this is what drives human behavior. And what I have learned through all my years working with clients is that, in fact, all behavior is motivated by getting needs met, and that's because as human beings, as living beings, what we're very focused on when we come into this world is survival. We all need to survive. And so I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are other models of needs, but the reason I love Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that it's complete. It kind of shows all the needs that we might have. It shows them in a hierarchy, which makes a lot of intuitive sense to people. And it helps you understand very quickly what drives behavior. And why is this important? Because if you understand this model and how it connects to your behavior and to your emotions, you will be able to understand how it may play into behavior patterns that you have that you're trying to change, but for some reason it feels like you're banging your head in the wall, against the wall, and you're not able to change. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes. First of all, when we come into this world, we don't know that there's a difference between who we are and this world that we're in. We don't have that level of perception yet as infants. But as we move through our life, by the time we're about 6 months, that's when separation anxiety kicks in, if any of you have had children. And that is typically when a baby is going to start realizing, oh my goodness, there's a difference between this world I'm living in and who I am, and here I am all alone in this world. I'm not connected to the world, and I have to figure out how to survive in the world. And of course, that's not a verbal thought because babies are pre-verbal. In fact, everything that happens from that moment on is the baby is trying to figure out how to survive. And how to survive is, what is it that I need to survive? And how do I get it? And so that happens pre-verbal with every living being. And so what governs this? What signals us that we have something that's important to survival and we have to get it? And that is our emotions. So when a baby feels hungry, it feels that pain in its stomach and it cries and it gets fed. And so that's kind of how the cycle works in the beginning. Well, the way the hierarchy works, I'm not going to go into all the detailed little needs, but in general, your physiological needs are things that you can't survive with for very long at all, like air and water. But those are great places to give examples of how your emotions work, because I think all of us can imagine what it would feel like if someone was holding our head underwater. We know we need air in just a minute or so to survive. We're starting to feel increasing pain at not being able to get air, and all of our senses are focused on getting air, and that's the only thing that matters at that time. And if you go through this pyramid, what you'll notice is the needs are clustered in levels, and each level is less urgent than the level below it. So the physiological level, if you're missing a need in that level, so if you're running a high fever, or if you're starving to death, or if you're not getting air or water, you're going to have all sorts of red flags, and your whole body is going to be mobilized around getting you back into a steady state so that you can survive. Once all of your physiological needs are met, which for most of us that is most of the time, then we move up to safety. And safety is, okay, someone's not going to kill me, I'm not going to die. And so for most of us in this society, that is connected to our state of financial well-being, so we don't feel like we're going to be kicked out of our house and be homeless on the street. And those are kind of mostly the issues. Or if we live in a violent area, then we could actually be afraid of being killed. So that's kind of the second level. But keep in mind that if you're in an area where people are running around with guns, but you have somebody holding your head underwater, you're still going to be focused first on getting your air and then on getting yourself to safety. So after our physiological needs are met and our safety needs are met, then as human beings, we all need to belong. So in order for us to survive, our species to survive, we need to be connected to other people. We can't survive very well on our own. That's why we don't have very many hermits, and that's why we tend to cluster in communities. We want to have a family or a group of friends, at the very least, that feels like family to us. Those are very important things. And we feel safe emotionally when we have a small group of people that we can trust. And so we develop small communities, and we have a community that might be our work community, might be our home community, we might have a church community or a community related to activities that we have other interests in, or a group of friends, but we tend to cluster into small communities. And belonging to a community is a very important element to our survival. So we're going to have good feelings when we're developing good relationships with people, and we feel a sense of belonging in a group. And we're going to feel really lonely feelings when we feel left out of groups, or we don't feel like we have enough relationships. That's a whole category of needs, feeling loved, feeling appreciated, feeling included, but I'm just going to deal with the category right now. Then above love and belonging, self-esteem, I want to think about that a little bit like status. So you're in a community, but we also need to feel valued in our community, because if we're valued in our community, if you think about a work community, for example, if people in our work community respect us, then it's going to be a lot easier for us to get the resources we need to get things done. We'll be able to get time. We'll be able to get people resources. People will listen to our ideas and they'll go in the direction that we need to go in. So we will be able to get things done more effectively in our work environments if people respect us and value us. There's a lot more to that, but in general, our status needs are basically, think of it as you need to feel valued in the communities that you are in, because if you are valued in the communities, it's a lot easier for you to get things done. It's a lot easier for you to get the resources you need. Self-actualization, think about that as your curiosity and your creativity. So it's kind of like all of your other needs are met, and now you get to focus on the things that are really inherently fulfilling to you. This is when people get really creative, they do their art, maybe they get to work on hobbies because they don't have to worry about all of their responsibilities. Now, in general, your whole goal as a human being is to have an intact needs pyramid. And the reason I say that is because when any one of your needs are unmet, you will feel an emotional signal, an emotional reaction. It will feel like being triggered, which is why those of you that signed up via Eventbrite and got an email yesterday will have gotten a link to a trigger log. And those of you who didn't, don't worry about it. I can always send you one later. Just email me. When you're triggered, when you feel frustrated, when you feel sad, when you feel hurt, when you feel anxious, when you feel bored, when you feel exhausted and drained, all of those negative feelings are signals that in that moment you have a hole in your needs pyramid. All of your emotions are connected to, in that moment, having an unmet need. When you have all your needs met, and if you want, you can think of this as a sail in a boat, in a sailboat, and unmet needs might be little holes popping in the sail. So if you have a hole in the sail, you got to patch it up. You don't want to have any holes in your needs pyramid, because if you have holes in your needs pyramid, all of your energy, all of your emotional energy is devoted to patching up those holes. And so if you always have holes in your needs pyramid, then you are always have a lot of emotional energy, and you're always spending all of your time patching up sails. You're always stressed, and it's not a very happy lifestyle, and it's a very stressful lifestyle. And a lot of people live a life like that, where they feel a low degree of stress almost every day, all day. So if you have an intact needs pyramid, everything's different. First of all, you feel a sense of well-being. And a lot of times what I'll do, and I've done this in many classes, is ask people, think of yourself when you're at your best. When you're at your best, generally what you feel is a sense of well-being. You feel confident, you feel calm, you feel focused, your head is clear, and that's your state of being when all of your needs are met. So in that state of being, that's often the way people even define happiness, is being calm, content, confident, having that state of well-being. That's often how people define happiness. And then think about when you're calm, confident, content, focused, clear, that's when we're at our most effective. So what I tell everybody is to use the needs pyramid as a grounding tool. This is the first tool I give people, other than the trigger log, when they start this process, because the trigger log helps you understand when you're getting triggered and start seeing the patterns. And every single time you're triggered, you have an unmet need. So if you can document 10 times, 5 times that you're being triggered, what you're going to start noticing is, wow, the same needs keep coming up over and over again. That's maybe where my holes are in my needs pyramid. So let's talk just a little bit more about the holes in the needs pyramid before we go further. Some holes that you have in your needs pyramid are going to be very temporary. So, for example, one example I like to use is water. If I'm thirsty right now, that hole is going to be very temporary, and I'm not even going to have an emotional reaction. And the reason is because I have a glass of water right beside me. I feel a sense of abundance about certain needs or certain parts of my needs pyramid. In those areas of my needs pyramid, I know that there is plenty of this thing to go around. So if I know that there's plenty of water to go around, I'm just going to have maybe a little blip, a little signal that says, oh, my throat's dry, I need to take a break in talking so that I can take a drink and it doesn't annoy everybody listening to my voice on the speaker. So that would be about the extent of it. But let's say we lived in a desert, and the source of water in the desert was actually polluted. So in order for you to get fresh drinking water, you had to take water from this polluted water source, maybe a lake or a well or something, and you actually had to boil it and go through this entire process to purify it before you could even drink it. And let's say, however you stored that water, it was a very small container. So the process takes a long time. It's a lot of work. You don't have a lot of time to do it. And now you don't have very much water left and you're starting to feel thirsty. My guess is you're going to have a little bit of a stronger emotional reaction. I'd like you to just think about that. Your reaction is going to be stronger because now water is scarce. Now it takes a lot of work to get the water. It's going to take a lot of time to get the water. And the amount of water available to you is limited, at least the amount of water that is appropriate for you to drink. That's how the needs pyramid works. So you get an emotional trigger when a need is unmet. But in the case that you feel that whatever that thing is, whether it's belonging or status or safety or air, if you feel that that thing is readily available to you or abundant in the world to you, you're not going to have a very strong emotional reaction. It's just going to be a little signal, and then you're going to go get the need met. And so that need is only going to be unmet temporarily. It's kind of like having a patch, a little hole, a pinprick hole in your sail, and something that you could just like throw a little piece of tape on, and it takes 1 second, and you're done. But there are some areas of your pyramid, and we all have this, every human being, where you feel that that particular thing is somewhat scarce to you. And a great example would be the water in the desert example, but another example is if you grew up shy and awkward and you had a really hard time making friends, and so when you have friends, you don't feel like you could make new friends really easily. So you could have a sense of abundance about friends, or you could have a sense of scarcity about friends. And you're going to behave very differently depending on whether you have a sense of abundance or a sense of scarcity about your friends. If you have a sense of abundance about your friends, and you have an issue with one of your friends, it's going to be a lot easier to go talk about the issue. You're going to not have a lot of fears in the back of your mind. What if this person gets mad at me? What if they decide they don't want to be my friend anymore? Then I'm lost because it'll take me forever to make another friend that's good. If you have a sense of abundance about friends, you're not going to have those concerns. You're going to assume you'll be able to work it out. And if worst case scenario, you can't work it out and this friend decides they don't want to be your friend anymore, plenty of other people out there for you to get to know. You make friends easily, not an issue. If you feel like people just don't like you very much, it's very hard for you to find people that you can be close to. You're going to be a lot more protective of the friends that you have. You're going to be a lot more sensitive when something goes wrong. You're going to have a lot harder of a time resolving issues when they come up because you're going to have a lot of fear around it. It's going to be a lot higher stakes. You're going to be worried about losing the relationship. So it's going to be harder and much higher stress to deal with the issues. You're going to feel a lot more emotion about it. So in general, let's kind of review what's important to understand about this pyramid. The pyramid encompasses everything that you need to survive as a human being. Any kind of threat to your survival will be experienced as a surge of emotion that's experienced as some sort of stress. So it could be hurt, it could be frustration, it could be anything on the emotional spectrum that you experience as stress. And the degree of your reaction is going to be directly related to how abundant or how scarce you feel that this particular thing is to you. So if you feel that it's abundant, you feel that you're highly skilled at getting it, and there's a lot of it available to you in the world, you'll have a very low emotional reaction. If you feel that it's scarce, you feel that you're not very skilled at getting it, and or it's not very available in the world for you, you will have a strong emotional reaction. An intact pyramid is the key to everything. It's a key to effectiveness and the key to happiness. Because you feel a sense of well-being and you have a clear mind, you can focus and you can act without drain or drama. So what I do with most of my clients who want to work on this deeper work is I start with the needs pyramid and I say, this is always your goal, to have an intact needs pyramid, to figure out where the holes are in your pyramid and get them patched, because when you have an intact needs pyramid, you're going to feel a sense of well-being, you're going to have a clear mind, it's going to be easier for you to be effective, and you're going to be feeling happier. So everything else that we do in the program is devoted to getting you an intact needs pyramid. It's devoted to helping you identify where the holes in your pyramid might be, and it's devoted to helping you get those needs met. And so the first tool, which I know some of you did not get and some of you did get, is the trigger log. The trigger log helps you identify emotional surges. And as you log these different surges, you bring your awareness up to what your thinking process is and what is creating the story in your head about this thing that you need. So typically you'll find that you'll be reacting to people who you feel disrespecting you, maybe not giving you value, maybe not including you in things. And as you pay attention to the words of your thoughts and you ask yourself the question, what was the thing I needed in that moment? You're going to start noticing patterns, and those patterns are going to point to your unmet needs or the places in the pyramid where you feel scarcity. Okay? All right, before I open it for questions, right now everyone's on mute, and I will open it for questions a couple of times during the session. I'm going to show you our third tool. So our first tool would be the needs pyramid. The second tool would be the trigger log. Now we have another tool here. This tool helps you understand what happens in your mind that makes you believe that certain things that you need are scarce when they might not actually, in fact, be scarce to you. So what you'll notice at the bottom is my unmet needs, the holes in my sense of inner peace and the safety that repeatedly trigger and threaten me. And so when I say, what are my unmet needs, what I'm really talking about are, not the temporary, oh my gosh, I need a glass of water, or oh, I have this really difficult client who's intimidating me, or I just had a really bad day because I wasn't able to get anything done. Not the things that are sort of very usual occurrences that you may feel a little bit stressed out about, but then you bounce right back from, but the things that repeatedly show up in your life. The behavior patterns that show up over and over and over again. These are the things that I'm referring to here, because the behavior patterns that show up over and over and over again are usually linked to a hole in your needs pyramid that's kind of perpetual. It only gets patched up only a little bit, and it's a very flimsy patch, and it keeps getting poked through again. So we can think about it that way. So those are your unmet needs. On top of that is a belief, and that belief is what we call our scarcity belief. And what you'll notice is there is a condition to the belief. So typically there are three things that we use in our minds as conditions or reasons why a certain thing is scarce to us in the world. And this is a little bit psychological, but for the most part, especially, and I'm going to go backwards here for just a second if I can, in the love and belonging area especially. So for most people in this society, in this day and age, any unmet needs that you experience that are going to cause negative self-defeating patterns are going to be in these three middle layers of the pyramid. Safety will be just real, a lot of fear that you're experiencing. Love and belonging is a lot of relationship issues and not feeling included or not feeling like you have enough relationships. And so the prevailing emotion here is often a feeling of loneliness or being left out. But there's also feelings of anxiety in your relationships and a lot of concern, you know, about what other people's opinions are of you. And then that sort of continues into the self-esteem, but you're looking for opinion, what other people's opinions are of you. Do people value you? Do people respect you? That type of thing. So these are kind of the general areas where we might feel trapped in unmet needs. Well, what ends up happening is that when we're young is when we first develop our beliefs about how to get the things that we need to survive in the world. And those beliefs are based on some very limited information. First of all, we start figuring all this out when we're very, very young, you know, 3 years old, 5 years old at the oldest. And when you're less than 5 years old, you have a very limited paradigm of the world. Your immediate family or the immediate group of caregivers that you live in, that represents the world to you. So your place in the family, the personalities of the people that took care of you, all of that represent the whole world to you. So for example, I had one example of somebody in the class today that said, I was in a family of 5 kids. I felt like I had to fight and compete to get my needs met. And that makes a lot of sense. If you're in a family of 5 kids, and all the kids are grabbing all the food off the table, and if you don't grab quick enough, you're not going to get enough, then you're going to start feeling like you have to fight to get your needs met. Other people might have lived in a family with much fewer siblings, and they may have had parents that doted on them, but maybe they didn't ever feel like they got enough autonomy, or maybe they felt like their life was being controlled by parents who were over-focused on them. So, you know, it really doesn't matter what kind of life you lived. What matters is your ideas about the world were shaped by your family dynamic when you were that young, and your perspective of being 5 or less, thinking that the entire world revolves around you. So for example, the way people treat you must have something to do with you. You haven't quite yet developed the ability to put yourself in the shoes of other people. That's something that's a little bit more advanced, and that doesn't happen until you're older. So we develop these beliefs when we're young, and part of what we do in this process is we discover what the beliefs are. But I don't make it really, it's not like a deep psychological probe, because honestly, you don't have to learn everything about your beliefs. You only have to figure out what are the beliefs that I developed in my lifetime that tell me that certain things that I need to survive in the world are scarce. And why are they scarce? And typically, we're going to have 3 reasons why we think something is scarce. There's a whole family of I'm not good enough beliefs, right? So sometimes we feel that this is the world revolves around me, and the reason that my parents aren't giving me enough attention or love, or they didn't see this thing or value this thing about me, is because I'm just not good enough. And so I have to deserve attention. In order to feel worthy, I must deserve attention, or I must deserve it. So one of the scarcity beliefs might be, and I have an example coming up, that I have to do something to be worth getting these needs met. We could also have a scarcity belief because we don't believe that there's enough of something in the world, right? So we may grow up poor, and we might just not believe that there are enough opportunities in the world for us, and that we're always going to have to fight to make money. Or it might be about other people and how other people don't treat you fairly, and you have to always watch what their agenda is, and you always have to be on your guard around other people. So for each of us, it's very personal and different, but the source of all of the negative behavior patterns that plague us tend to be right there in that scarcity belief. And then here's the thing about that. That belief is not conscious as a belief. In other words, once we believe something, we don't think, oh, I have a belief. We think it's the truth about the world. And I have something that I can share about you to help you understand that too. So our goal in this program is first identify where your unmet needs are, but then try to build what we call your puzzle. Try to learn what your scarcity beliefs are, because the key to developing an intact needs pyramid is discovering your scarcity belief and rethinking it. Usually your scarcity belief comes with a condition. This is scarce for me in the world. I can't get it unless. So in our water in the desert example, water is scarce in the world. Clean drinking water is scarce for me in the world. I can't drink water unless I go through all of this process to purify it, which takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So that's my condition. I don't have enough pure water because the water is polluted and I have to go through this process of purifying it. So the survival belief is what must happen in order for me to get just a little tiny bit of what that thing is I need that I believe is scarce. And my survival strategy is the behaviors that I compulsively and automatically engage in to protect myself. And the collateral damage is the consequence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to an example which will make it a little bit easier here. So let's say we have someone who has an unmet need to feel valued, right? So what will happen is they'll fill out their trigger log and they find that a lot of times when they feel the most triggered, it's when people aren't valuing their contribution. And, you know, they feel like they did something at work and they were overlooked, or they were overlooked for a promotion at work, or people didn't hear them in the meeting or pay attention to their ideas, and they're constantly being triggered by those kinds of things. So, you know, the unmet need is to feel valued. Let's say that the scarcity belief is in their family. They didn't feel valued in their family either, but they did notice that when they did something remarkable, like when they were an athlete on a team and they hit a home run, or if they cleaned the kitchen all up by themselves, they would get attention, and very positive attention, for a short period of time. So they began to construct this idea in their head that if other people saw them as a success, they would get a little bit of value. So then they develop a survival belief on top of that. At all costs, I must accumulate as many achievements as possible to prove to others that I'm a success, because that's the only way I'm going to survive in this world. It's the only way I'm going to feel valued. That leads to a survival strategy of working hard to accumulate visible achievements. But the thing is, because we feel that it's scarce, nothing is going to satisfy us. And it means this leads to a behavior pattern of achieving something, feeling good about it for maybe about 3 whole minutes, and then going to the next achievement and wanting the next achievement and the next achievement. And it's insatiable. And this is how all unmet needs feel. They all feel insatiable. If you have an unmet need for belonging, you can have a friend be really nice to you, and you can feel an evening where you're with really close friends, and then you go home and you start feeling lonely again. If you have an unmet need for safety, you can feel safe you're in a bunker and no one's going to come get you, and then pretty soon you start worrying about how people might get through the bunker. So whatever you have as an unmet need, any feeling of being satiated is only temporary, and it's continuous. So the survival strategy starts showing up almost like an obsessive behavior pattern. And any behavior pattern that's obsessive like that comes with collateral damage. So one example of a survival strategy is people-pleasing. So there are a lot of people that somehow, as they built their puzzle, they came to, I must have other people like me. If other people like me, then I'll get my sense of love and belonging. So at all costs, I must make people like me. And so their survival strategy for making people like them might include things like in our class, there was an example today of someone who always bought what everybody else was selling, whether they needed it or not, always said yes to all invitations, whether it fit in their calendar or not, always said yes whenever anybody needed help, whether they had time to help or not, always went out of their way to do things to help other people. And what's the collateral damage of that? Well, the collateral damage of being a people pleaser is often that you resent the fact that you don't have any time for yourself, and sometimes you don't even know what your own needs are because you're too busy manipulating everybody else and trying to meet their needs so that they like you. Now, in this example, our high achiever, the collateral damage for our high achiever is that friends see that person is out for themselves. I mean, friends pick up on the fact that all they care about is achieving things for themselves, so the relationships aren't that authentic. They tend to ignore family. They may say family is important to them, but they just can't get themselves to spend time with family and anything else that's not achievement-oriented. And they also feel tired and resentful a lot of the time because when you can't stop making yourself go, 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 you lose out on sleep, you lose out on doing things that you kind of wish that you could relax and do, but then we set aside time for you to relax and you just can't relax. So what I'm going to do right now is open it up for questions, but I'm going to have you chat me questions because we have quite a few people on the call, and I'd like you to just, this way I'll be able to answer them as they come in, but if no chats come in, we'll be able to continue to go through the presentation here and get done on time. So I'm not seeing any chats yet, so I'm just going to keep going, but feel free to chat anytime, and then I'll break again in a few minutes to answer any chats that come through. So there's basically 7 steps in this process of change that we go through. 1 is identifying the unmet needs. 2 is to begin work on getting your needs met, and we have some exercises for that I did not share in this class. But what people often find when they start doing the work to get their needs met is that they actually are blocking their needs from getting met. And like they might want appreciation, they might have a high need for appreciation, but then when they get complimented, they start noticing that they miss the compliment. When someone appreciates them, they discount it in their head. So we have exercises that help people become aware of their negative self-talk and how their self-talk or the stories in their head discount the things that they need. So then we have you fill out the puzzle, and the puzzle is the model that I just showed you. And when you fill out the puzzle, that's a big aha for people. And just to let you know, for any of you that might want to go through this process, typically people will go through about 5 puzzles before they get to kind of the core of it all. So you'll have a cluster of needs here, a cluster of needs there. You'll fill out these different puzzles. They don't seem related, but then you get to a puzzle, and I call it the core puzzle because all of the other puzzles now fit in. It's not suddenly like you have a puzzle piece that everything connects to, and your whole picture makes sense, and you start saying, oh, that's why I always do that. I always do that. I do that here in my life, and I do that here, and I do that here. Oh, this is why I do that. It just makes complete sense. It's such a relief, too, to see how these behaviors all fit together. But filling out the puzzle and having those wonderful ahas cannot be the final step, because if you want to change it, you have to recognize and change your scarcity belief. So what we do is we hone in on the condition that you've created in your scarcity belief, and then we detach the condition and we have you reopen the case to learn how you get your needs met. Once you believe you can get your needs met without your survival strategy, you will no longer be trapped by it. So what will typically happen in coaching is people will come to me and they want to work up here because your belief is that this survival strategy you have to do, and you have to do well because it's the only way that you'll survive. So even if it causes a lot of collateral damage. So a good example is someone comes to me and they say, Nahid, I have to learn how to manage time better. And I know I can give them a million different time management tools. They will not use the time management tools because the issue is not that they don't know how to organize their time, it's that they can't say no to certain things. And so they're always going to overfill their time compulsively because of their survival strategy. So the only way I'm really going to help that person develop a different relationship with time is to take them through this process and help them identify this and change this scarcity belief. Same thing with people who come to me and say, I don't speak up in meetings. I'm not very assertive at work. Well, they could have a people-pleasing survival strategy, so it could be make them petrified if they spoke up and someone discounted what they said or something like that. So they might be able to develop a few skills to make some incremental progress, but if you focus your coaching only up here, you're not going to make real significant change. Some people don't need to make real significant change. Some people only need a few incremental improvements in their life, and that's fine. It's only when you feel yourself constantly nagged at and struggling with a self-defeating behavior pattern. For example, fear of success. You know intellectually that you could be more successful, and you start, but every time in your life you start really believing that you're going to make it this time and you start becoming successful, you start noticing that at some level you start subtly sabotaging yourself. Or you have something like procrastination that always prevents you from doing your best work. Or you have something in your interpersonal style. For example, if you're a boss and you tend to micromanage, and no matter how much feedback you've gotten on how micromanaging is actually disempowering your team, you're still micromanaging them because you're afraid that if things don't go well, it's on you. So you've got a survival strategy hooked into that, and there's no way you're going to stop micromanaging until we get to the bottom of the scarcity belief. So that's kind of what we do in our steps. So what I have here, and those of you who have the screen up, you might want to do a screenshot, and I'll sort of move this little thing so that you can do a screenshot. This screenshot will give you a template to do your own puzzle, but you can also email me directly afterwards if you'd like to have a puzzle to do. I know that when we do this in our self-discovery sessions, people love working the puzzle because it kind of puts themselves in a pattern and it sorts their patterns out in a way that makes sense. But it's hard to do your own puzzle without help. However, I will walk you through the steps of doing your puzzle the easiest way possible if you're going to do it yourself. The first is to start with your survival strategy because typically you're not going to be able to see these lower levels. How to do a screenshot from the computer is one of the questions that just came out. And to let you know, all you have to do is hit your print screen key. So if you have this up and you hit your print screen key, it should give you this screen in picture format, and you can dump it into like a blank PowerPoint format and blow it up. But also, anybody who emails you, I'm happy to send this worksheet to you afterwards. Okay? All right, so the way you fill out the puzzle, starting with your survival strategy is the thing that you do over and over and over again that you feel like you couldn't stop doing, like you need a lot of willpower to stop doing it. And it can be things like not speaking up or doing the opposite, yelling at people. It could be procrastinating. It could be not being able to sit down. It could be constantly being organized and overwhelmed. But whatever behavior pattern that you constantly do, you've maybe thought about changing, but you maybe resigned yourself, this is just part of my personality, I'm always going to be doing this. So that is something that you tend to be aware of, and you usually can write that down. You usually know what your survival strategy is, and you know what the collateral damage is. But what becomes more blurry is this other stuff, which is what leads to it. So the trigger log will help, because that will help get you to the need. But another thing that could get you to your need is, if you're very aware of your thoughts, what do you secretly hope your survival strategy will get you? And what will that get you? And what will that get you? If you're really honest with yourself, typically what you're doing in your survival strategy is something like trying to make people like you, or trying to make people see that you're right, or trying to make sure that you get your fair share. but you're trying to make something happen with your survival strategy. Whatever it is you're trying to make happen with your survival strategy is something you believe will get you something you need. So you can break it down by just by observing yourself and taking notes. Then, once you've done that part, ask yourself those questions. The most important thing is you want to guess at what is my condition? What is my scarcity belief? What is it that I believe has to happen in order for me to get what I need? So for most of us, you'll notice your self-talk. You'll notice the stories you tell yourself. Those will give you a clue, because whatever you're trying to make happen is usually your condition, right? So something must happen in order for me to get my need met. If everyone has to like me in order for me to get my need met, then my scarcity belief will be, I can't get my need met unless everybody likes me. If you're trying to get things to be fair, then I can't get my need met unless other people will be fair. If you're trying to get people to be impressed with you, right? I can't get my needs met unless other people see me as a success. So these are some things to reflect on. It is not easy to do this on your own, but as I said, there is a process that you can go through that can for sure give you some insights. And I do see another chat here. Okay, that was just the one about the screenshot. So I'm going to move on and see how we're doing on time. All right. So let me kind of go over what we just said, and if you want, you can screenshot this one too for those of you who are screenshotting. So this is kind of what we do with people once they've filled out their puzzle and they've sort of discovered what their belief system is. You try to identify your scarcity belief. It's usually something like, I must be a certain way, others must see me in a certain way, or the world must change in a certain way in order for me to get this thing that I believe is scarce in the world for me. Once you've identified your condition, then you can begin to break it, because the real key is identifying that you have a belief. Typically, where you're going to struggle here is that we do not believe that our scarcity belief is a belief. We just think it's reality. So people have the power to change beliefs simply by noticing them as beliefs and reassessing them, going after new evidence, asking questions like, how do other people get this need met? Do they have to have everybody like them in order to be loved, right? Or to create experiments. You know, let me try doing something and seeing what happens as a result. Maybe talk to others and find out how they get the need met. Do journaling, paying attention to your self-talk, deliberately gathering evidence that helps you see how to get the need met in the world. If you do that as an adult, you're going to come up with a very different strategy than you came up with when you were a child. When you were a child, you had a lot less power than you have now, and you had a lot smaller of a world that you lived in. So you had a completely different perspective and a completely different set of resources. So you're going to get different answers, but you have to reopen the question. And that's where people trip up. They never reopen the question because they don't realize that they even are looking at the world in a distorted way. And in order to help you understand that, I'd like to share a very short video for you. This is a YouTube video that I've embedded in the PowerPoint. It's only going to be about 2 minutes. I'm going to play it for you. You may not hear the music in the background. You don't have to worry about it because everything is in the text. So if you hear the music, great. If you don't hear it, don't worry about it. I'm just going to play this. I really want you to pay attention. Whoops. All right. So I hope you guys heard that, and I love that example of the elephant and the rope. Some of you may have already heard that story somewhere, but this is actually what they do with elephants. They actually train them by roping them to a small post or a small tree with a very, a rope that they could easily break when they're adults. But because they're conditioned to not believe that that rope will break, they don't even try to break it. So what I'd like you to think about is, let's imagine that this elephant was in our class and we're trying to take her through the growth process. And, we ask her to start a trigger log, and she says, well, sometimes I get frustrated when I don't feel very free. I mean, I kind of have a need to be free and a need to feel strong. And so let's say we gave her homework and we said, I'd like you to really think about the fact that you have an unmet need to be free, and I want you to start working really hard on getting that need met. And what would she do? Well, my guess is that she probably would maybe think about walking around the tree more, and she might come back to class and say, well, yeah, I found that I could move a little bit more around the tree. I didn't have to stand in one place. I could actually kind of circle my way around it and move 180. But my guess is she is never going to even look at the rope. She's not going to look at the rope, and she's not even going to think about breaking away the rope. And why is that? The reason why is because when she was young, she couldn't get away from the rope. So the rope just became the fabric of her reality. And she never thought to re-question it. We never think to re-question our beliefs, because once we believe something, they just become our truth. So for example, if someone told you, you would never question that the color red is the color red. I mean, now that you know your colors are your colors. You're not going to change that unless somebody comes back with information and says, hey, you know what? We've been looking at colors all wrong, and there's a completely different way that we can program our brain, and we can see 15 times as many colors if we just start looking at colors in this different way. And suddenly we decide, well, gosh, that's interesting. Let me try looking at the colors differently. Well, imagine if we pointed to the rope and asked the elephant if she could break free. Now, she's never considered it before. She probably assumes the answer is no. But if we asked her if she would be willing to try again, that might get her looking at the rope. And then if she looks at the rope, she might give it a little nudge or a pull, or she might mess around with the knot to see if she could untie it. And that's what I want you to think about for your life. The reason we get trapped in negative behavior patterns is because we've created a system of beliefs, layer upon layer upon layer. I'm scrolling back to our little puzzle here. Layer upon layer upon layer. And this system of beliefs that we now just take for granted as the truth govern certain behavior patterns that we have. And we don't question them because we simply haven't looked at them. We simply haven't even paid attention to going way down here and going, that's a rope. Maybe I should think about whether I can untie it now. I wasn't strong enough to untie it as a kid, but maybe now I can untie it. So that's the process we take our clients through. And I know we're getting to the top of the hour here. So I have one more thing that I'll add to this. I think we're also going to email this to anybody who signed up for the class, but again, I know there's a couple people on the roster that maybe did not sign up for the class. So if you didn't and you want us to send you a flyer, just send me an email and I'd be happy to. I do a group coaching program. People who are in the group coaching program go through this intensive process by choice when they want to. So the group program includes a lot of different types of classes, including business classes, and so some don't ever go through this deeper work, but some do, and the ones who do go through this maybe a couple of times a year, kind of really work through it and make some big personal shifts in their life. But you don't have to be a part of the group program, or it's starting a new individual program that you can do, and so we do have a flyer. So if you want to do this work with some coaching, with some hand-holding, you are able to do it. So it is the top of the hour now. For those of you that need to get off right away, you can. But for those who don't and want to stay on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the recording, and I'm just going to go around in a circle. And since the recording's off, you can feel free to ask any question that you want, and I'd be happy to answer them. So I'm turning the recording off now for those of you who are listening.